This film tells about the life journey of a man named Tazik. Tazik is a man who is known as a thug who is highly respected and feared. Tazik is a thug who has never been beaten by other thugs. Even the gangster boss was unable to defeat Tazik. One day Tazik was involved in a fight which caused Tazik to stab someone from another gangster and resulted in the man being killed by Tazik's hands. Tazik had two friends where these two friends always took refuge under Tazik's auspices, but on Tazik Day, the killer of a gangster, both this friend of his did not want to get involved and left Tazik until news of an imperfect gangster began to spread and Tazik was arrested by the police. Tazik was charged with murder with a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Tazik spent his prison term in prison without feeling guilty for the incident that, after 1 year of Tazik in prison, a mother named Mrs. Sunflower often came to visit Tazik to give Tazik provisions and check her health and even to talk. Mrs. Sunflowers visited Tazik every 2 months in 9 years. In the second year, Sunflowers' mother told Tazik that she was the mother of the man Tazik killed 9 years ago. Tazik began to melt down and regretted his actions. Tazik cried and apologized to Sunflower's mother. Again, Tazik's detention period will be finished because the Power Mother will withdraw her demands, but before Sunflower's mother withdraws her charges, Tazik is asked to receive a notebook containing conditions that must be met after Tazik is released from prison. Sunflower's mother said that after today, they both will meet again for the next year. Ms. Sunflower asks Tazik that when he is released from prison, Tazik must go to Ms. Sunflower's house, and from now on, Tazik will be appointed as an adopted child by Mrs. Sunshield. 1 year has passed. Tazik gets out of prison. Tazik gets on the bus to go to Mrs. Sunflower's house. On top of a bus, Tazik opens the notebook that Mrs. Flowers gave 1 year ago, and Tazik starts putting tick marks to mark what to do and what should not be done. When Sunflowers arrived at the house, Sunflower's Tazik was greeted by Mrs. Sunflower's daughter. Tazik was told to come back later that night because Mrs. Sunflower was not at home, because Tazik had no one else, so Tazik finally decided to go to the sauna. He intended to go soak in a hot spring because he had not been to the sauna for a long time. When Tazik arrived, Tazik was quite shocked and confused when he saw the place. Tazik, which looked outdated, looked confused, looks very foreign. A sauna manager reprimands Tazik because Tazik keeps making the locker ring. Tazik, with his innocent face, just apologizes to the sauna manager, but not long after that Tazik again makes the locker ring until the sauna manager wants to scold Tazik for the second time. But when he settled with Tazik, the manager of the sauna came back to Tazik with an angry look on his face. But this time the sauna manager looked shocked to hiccups because he saw the entire body of Tazik covered in tattoos. Even the other visitors were also surprised to see the Tazik body full of tattoos. In the evening, Tazik came to Mrs. Sunflower's house to meet her, but the meeting did not go smoothly at first because Ms. Sunburn drove away Tazik. She forgot that she had promised 1 year ago, until finally Tazik was accepted by Mrs. Sunflower, and Mrs. Sunflower treats Tazik like his own child. Long story short, Tazik got a job in a car repair shop. At that time, many did not believe that Tazik would change 360 degrees, and unbeatable Tazik was now a worker in a car repair shop. Until one day the gangsters came to the workshop where Tazik worked. Here, the gangsters intend to test whether Tazik really has changed or not. Tazik is beaten by some thugs, but Tazik is really true, he doesn't fight back. Sunflowers and his stepbrother were also visited and persecuted by other gangsters, but it turned out that the gangsters were led by one of Tazik's best friends, who used to be the closest person to him. The gangsters were trying to seize the land belonging to Sunflow's mother, because the gangster boss wanted to seize every area which he mastered, but because there was a Tazik who lived in Mrs. Sunflower's house, the gangsters didn't seem brave enough to go to the Flowers' mother's house. if there was a Tazik there. A few weeks later, when Tazik visited his half-sister's campus, they met and went home together. While on the way home from his half-sister's campus, suddenly Tazik was kicked by a teenager who claimed he was a gangster. The teenager was annoyed because Tazik's half-sister had rejected his love several times, and the teenager was jealous seeing them walk together. Tazik was beaten by teenagers. That was until finally the teenager stopped with a scared face when they saw the torn technical clothes, and all the tattoos on his body were visible. All the teenagers were stunned. Then Tazik stood up while tidying up his clothes, and he immediately left that place. The next day, when Tazik's younger brother came home from campus, suddenly from a distance a motorcycle at full speed approached his younger brother Tazik and hit him in the face with a brick. The motorbike man hit his head until he fell on the road, until he was unconscious. Knowing what happened, Mrs. Sunflower starting to get desperate, and he thought that if all this was done by the gangsters, then he decided to sell his land to the gangsters at a cheap price, so that Mrs. Sunflower could live more peacefully without the interference of gangsters anymore. When Tazik accompanied his younger sister to the hospital, it turned out that these gangsters secretly came to Sunflower's mother and killed Sunflower's mother, and the one who killed the flower's mother was Tazik's own best friend, and then the death of Sunflower's mother was made, as if she committed suicide at 12 at night. Tazik came home to see the condition of Mrs. Sunflower's, but Tazik was surprised to find Mother Sunflower's body, who was seen with her neck hanging in Tazik's living room. With a shocked face, immediately lowered Mother Sunflower's, and she tried to wake Mother Sunflower's. But Tazik realized that everything was over too late. In a state of sadness and despair, Tazik finds an earring that looks familiar to him. Then the next day, when Sunflower's mother's funeral is taking place, Tazik looks very sad. Here Tazik apologizes to Ms. Sunflower, who has died. If now Tazik is gone, Tazik was able to keep his promise to his mother and flowers. Tazik headed to the gathering place for the gangsters who had killed his mother. When Tazik arrived at that place, the gangster boss heard the sound of Tazik crying, and they were confused about who was crying. Then Tazik brought 2 petrol cans, started opening the bottle cap and letting the gasoline come out of the canister. Then Tazik lit a cigarette, and then threw the cigarette butt towards the petrol. Because the fire had started to spread, then they tried to put out the fire. One by one, the gangsters were paralyzed by Tazik. Even though his body had received many blows, even Tazik received several stabs. Tazik did not fall. Tazik killed 2 of his best friends who had been with him before. After all of them were killed, Tazik killed the gangster boss who ordered his men to interfere with his life. After Tazik killed them, all the tricks chose to kill in the flames until Tazik died. The film was finished. Thank you for stopping by this channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, and see you soon.